Ladies and gentlemen, in this video, I'm going to be discussing the new Reich Chancellery, an official government building in Nazi Germany commissioned by Adolf Hitler in 1938, completed in just 11 months, headed by lead architect Albert Speer. Hitler wanted the new building as symbolism of power and dominance, the common neoclassical architecture we see with many Nazi designs. From 1933 to 1937, Hitler operated out of the old Chancellery, which was considered modest at the time. The building was originally constructed during the 19th century, and Hitler had viewed it as inadequate and began discussions with Speer for a new chancellery. In the summer of 1937, Hitler officially commissioned Speer for the project, and by October of 1937, the initial foundation had already been laid before the final design process had even been completed. Workers worked day and night using floodlights in the evening for the 24/7 project. There were over 4,000 workers total. The building was officially completed in mid-December of 1938, taking just 11 months as the Nazis rushed to build it in an extremely fast fashion. On January 9th of 1939, it was officially inaugurated. The total cost estimate was 90 million Reichmarks, which is around $400 million today, adjusted for inflation. The marble gallery was considered the structure's best feature. The length of it was 146 meters. The grand corridor led to Hitler's office was designed to overwhelm visitors. Hitler's own grand office was enormous, measuring at 4,300 square feet with very high ceilings, massive desks, and bronze sculptures to be used mainly for ceremonial receptions, not for daily work. It was political theater to project dominance of Adolf Hitler. Hitler's usage of the new chancellery was sporadic at best. It was most used during its inaugural year in 1939 in the lead up to World War II. By 1942, Hitler spent most of his time at the Wolfslayer or at the Burghof in Bavaria. The chancellery was becoming less relevant as the war began turning against Germany. By late 1943, air raids had started to commence on Berlin, making the new chancellery increasingly dangerous. At that point, only short visits occurred at the chancellery, mostly for Nazi Party events. In January of 1945, Hitler returned permanently to the chancellery, but not to the building itself, but to the underground Führer bunker, which was feverishly being constructed. He was rarely seen above ground in the final months as the Allied bombing runs commenced. On April 30th of 1945, Hitler committed suicide in the Führer bunker beneath the new chancellery. There were many pieces of furniture moved from the new chancellery into the Führer bunker in January of 1945 to set up for Hitler's stay. When it comes to the timeline of damage to the new Reich Chancellery, it really started in 1943 with British and U.S. armed forces commencing large-scale strategic bombing raids on Berlin. The new Reich Chancellery initially was not the main target, although in 1943 there was some structural damage that occurred to the buildings near the chancellery, and windows along with roof tiles suffered mild damage from the shock waves and falling debris. In 1944, the chancellery suffered increased damage as bombing runs intensified after the Allied invasion of Normandy in June of 1944. At that point, the new Reich Chancellery sustained more direct hits, including interior rooms being shattered, along with ceilings cracking, although nearby government buildings were more severely affected. In 1944, the new Reich Chancellery was ruled unsafe to stay at, and Hitler opted for the Wolfslayer at that point. In mid-April of 1945, during the Battle of Berlin, the area of the new Reich Chancellery became a battlefield. In late April of 1945, there was a large Soviet artillery bombardment that severely damaged the chancellery, including collapsing ceilings, marble columns, and fires breaking out throughout the building. By May 2nd, 2 days after Hitler had killed himself, Soviet forces had fully captured the area, and at that point the chancellery was heavily bombed and looted. Over the next 4 years, the new Reich Chancellery at that point would have just been 6 to 7 years old itself, was stripped and dismantled. The Soviets had taken valuable materials, including marble that was removed and used in Moscow's subway system, along with statues and metal fixtures. From 1947 to 1949, the Soviet military intentionally demolished most of the new Reich Chancellery. In the 1950s, the final ruins of the Chancellery and the Fuhrer bunker complex were buried under rubble and eventually paved over. During the East German rule, the site was off limits and unmarked. The Fuhrer bunker was sealed shut, although parts were eventually rediscovered years later. Albert Speer would later reflect on the building of the Reich Chancellery in a new book, saying that the Chancellery was designed to be overwhelming, theatrical, and intimidating, describing it as a propaganda tool made of stone, meant to instill awe of diplomats and visitors. He also said that due to the rushed building time, the new Chancellery potentially only would have been able to last a few decades. He reflected on how proud he was at the time building such a structure in only 11 months. One of the greater mysteries of the Chancellery revolved around Adolf Hitler's globe. It was originally made custom for Hitler in the 1930s, displayed inside the new Chancellery. There's been rumors that Hitler was actually given 2 different custom globes, one of them being inside the new Chancellery, which can be seen in photos. This was one of several custom globes made for high-ranking Nazi officers. The globe at the Chancellery was said likely to be taken by the Soviets in May of 1945. Another interesting story revolves around the bronze horses within the new Reich Chancellery. 2 life-size bronze statues stood in the Court of Honor within the courtyard. The horses disappeared without a trace after the war. Western intelligence originally presumed they were likely melted down for scrap or looted by the Soviet Union. In a surprise twist, however, they were discovered in a 2015 private warehouse in Western Germany. They were hidden on private property. The horses now are technically owned by the German government in state custody. Believe it or not, the Chancellery was equipped with a private train platform that had a hidden access point connected to Hitler's personal train line. It was not directly under the building, but it was located within walking distance and linked to the Chancellery through a discreet tunnel entrance. There was also a secret panic elevator that was beneath one of the marble panels in the main hall. It was a concealed elevator that was designed to drop Hitler straight into the lower levels of a corridor that led to the Fuhrer bunker. Hitler also had a superstition and insisted that there was to be no black marble used on any part of the new Chancellery, as he viewed black stone as a symbol of death and defeat, part of the reason why the red and gray tones were represented within the new Chancellery. Overall, the new Reich Chancellery had a very short life, originally a rushed project built in only 11 months, operating in normalcy for less than a year because of the outbreak of World War II, and meaning a quick end after only being in operation for a total of 6 years. It was one of the only bigger buildings the Nazis were able to get done before World War II commenced.